All right, so I'm going to start recording. It usually asks you. Okay. All right. So thank you for coming today. I know it's the first day back from break, so you're probably still powering your brain back up, which is all right. This is a good way to do it. We're going to be talking about medical and dental school entrance exams. We're mostly going to focus on the MCAT, but I'll do a little brief slide overview of the DAT as well. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to do a brief overview, talk a little about cost, timing, study plan, resources, and some common questions. I also told Emma and Gracie that if they have any questions throughout, feel free to raise your hand or pop them in the chat, and we can talk that way as well. Okay, so this might be how you feel when you think about your entrance exam to medical or dental school, right? I think even just like bringing up the topic, I see this like face on most students and alum, like, oh, like how am I going to do this, right? So it's a big undertaking, as is applying to these programs. So before we get started, I just wanted to show you the breathing purple elephant. So whenever you are feeling like this is overwhelming, I don't know if I can do this, should I even apply to medical school, right? Take a deep breath. Everything we do one step at a time, one day at a time. And you're here, which means that you're in a really good position to create a study plan that will allow you to be successful and also hopefully create some balance in your studying for the MCAT. It's not going to be easy, right? But I think the important part is to know that creating that balance and taking that time to breathe is a really important piece of the puzzle. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to really focus on the MCAT today, which is the medical school entrance exam. And we will talk a little bit about the DAT, which is the dental school entrance exam. So those are two different tests. And we do have a few students and alum at Wellesley who apply to dental school every year. So I just want to make sure that they have the information they need to find and study for the DAT. So just a little bit about the DAT. Is different than the MCAT. So the cost is different and the amount of time to complete it is different. So it's a shorter test. It also is available year round at many testing centers. So it's a little bit easier to schedule and take the DAT. And it has a little bit different content on it as well. The ADA, which is the American Dental Association, has the most helpful information on the DAT, and just like we'll kind of go over the AAMC for the MCAT and all of their really helpful information. The ADA is that for dental school, so it gives you a lot of resources that you'll need to take this test and to feel confident creating a study plan for this test. So make sure to go there to find out the most helpful and relevant information. We at Career Education do have discounted materials for both the MCAT, DAT, and actually the GRE as well if you end up taking that entrance exam. So it's always nice to check that out before studying for these tests. And for the DAT, we have the DAT boot camp, which is one of the study resources, and we have it like significantly discounted to our students and alumna. So you can get that online through our website. We also have a couple of books you can rent in our library to study for the DAT as well. So that is a little bit of info on that test. And now we're going to move on and talk about the MCAT. So most of our students at Wellesley do, or most students I work with and Cindy work with do apply to medical school. So we see a lot of folks taking the MCAT. And so this is the main focus of our conversation today. So just a little overview of what the MCAT is. So it's the standardized test for medical school, multiple choice, and it has 4 sections. So some of this you may be kind of familiar with right now, but if not, the sections are biological and biochemical foundations of living systems, chemical and physical foundations of biological systems, psychological, social, and biological foundations of behavior, and then critical analysis and reasoning skills. And so the AAMC is a website, an organization, the one that creates the MCAT and all the content on the MCAT. And so they have a lot of really fantastic resources. And one of the things that they have is they have a breakdown, a full PDF of the different sections on the MCAT and what each one entails specifically. So that's a resource that I can actually drop in the chat for you if you'd like, and I can share after the presentation as well. But if you want to have more of an in-depth look of what is on each of these sections, you can get it there. So let me pull that up. And I will share that with you. I have a list of resources I wanted to share. And everything is virtual. And since you can't click on my presentation, I will drop it in the chat. So you should be able to click that. It'll open you right up to here. And it goes through each of the sections more specifically. You can kind of see on there. All right. So here's a nice kind of exam overview. This is again from the AAMC, the creators of the test. And it talks about what you're kind of going to go through on test day. So length of the test is around 7.5 hours. So it's a really long test. They do give you a couple optional breaks throughout, but a lot of it is really that sit time, that focus time on the exam. And so you can see the amount of time spent in each area that we kind of just went over. And just a little bit more about the allotted time for each. So one of the biggest things we'll talk about today is like just prepping for the seated time, right? So there's really no other exam like this in terms of length and structure. So one of the things that will really help you be successful on exam day is to have prepared by doing a couple of more than a couple, actually, full length tests where you're sitting for the 7.5 hours and you're preparing yourself for that amount of rigorous time working on this type of test. That's a big portion of it. All right. Okay, so MCAT cost and registration. So at this point in the year, we're in November, so you may have already registered for the MCAT, but if not, just some important information to know if you're going to register soon or next year. Number one thing to do is make sure that you have an AAMC ID. You'll need this in the future anyway to apply to medical school. So making sure that you're all set up in their system. And then you can also register for updates from the MCAT as well. So it's nice to just have that done and out of the way. Registration fees. So there's a standard registration fee, and then there's a fee if you are part of the fee assistance program, which we'll talk about. So it's, it's not a cheap test. So ideally taking it only once is great. But of course you do have options to take it more than once if you need to. And then there's also fees associated with changing your test date, which actually we have folks do this every year. So why would you change your test date, you ask? So maybe you schedule a test date and then you get to that date and you realize, oh my gosh, I was not able to study as much as I wanted to. So you may want to push it. And so in that case, you can do that, but there's fees associated with that. And they go up the longer you wait. So the earlier you know, if you want to switch it, the better, obviously, to save a little bit of money, because everything costs money in this case. And these are just some tips from the AAMC on opening day. So opening day this year already happened. So it was October 24th and 25th, and that's a pretty common timeline. So if you're someone looking at next year, again, you're going to want to look in October for the MCAT registration to open up. I just mentioned in the last slide that you could receive updates about the MCAT. So that number 1 here talks about that. And they're also on Twitter. So it's just nice to see like receive updates about test dates, scores, just different things like that. And then of course they have all this really great information that's helpful before you even register for the exam, which is part of the MCAT Essentials. So, have you two registered for the MCAT?
No, I have not.
Okay. Are you going to be taking it this year?
Next fall, so probably around a year.
Okay, great. Good. So we have, folks in different stages, which is good. And so it is a unique test, so it's good to know that it's different than the GRE, which is the graduate admissions test for other programs, where you can schedule that test whenever you like, usually throughout the year. Whereas the MCAT, they have these 2 days it opens, and what I hear from applicants often is they log on, they get in a big line to wait to register for their test, and then they cross their fingers that they get the date and the site that they're hoping for. But everyone across the country is doing it essentially at the same time. So it can be a little bit of a stressful situation, as if you needed more stress, right? But it's good to know how it works so that you can walk into it knowing that the wait time's normal. There's options, like if you, for instance, want to take it in Boston, but there's no more seats, you can always look in surrounding areas, and that you will be able to get a test date. And they open up also later as people switch their dates as well. Gracie, do you want to mention how that experience went for you, if you feel comfortable? Because I know you said you just registered.
Yeah, it actually I think was smoother than I expected because I
Good.
was kind of scared of the whole process and I was I think 16,000 in line or something like that. I don't even remember what it was, but there were a lot of people ahead of me.
Yeah.
So I was really scared, but then I actually ended up getting the testing center in Wellesley, which
Good.
was kind of the perfect scenario because I did not want to go into Boston.
Right. Good. And
But
so
yeah,
how long did it take you with that number to get through?
I think I was waiting for 1 or 2 hours
Okay.
somewhere. I think up to 2 hours, but you also have the option where you can set up your email for them to notify you when you're closer in line.
Right.
But I was too scared that I was going to miss it, so I just sat on for the
Yeah.
whole time.
I've heard people say that before. But luckily, like, you can work on other things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah,
So,
that's a pretty common experience, I think.
so if I'm planning to take it next fall, should I have already registered?
I can show you the
I
testing
don't
dates
think so.
that they have registered for already, but no, it's not likely you would have registered yet.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Mhm. So actually that might be our next slide. Yes. So this are the dates that you can register for now. So registration opened on the October dates, the 24th and 25th, but it's still open now. So you can still go in, and like Gracie could go in and change it. Other people might go in and be looking for a seat still. And so it's unique again in the way that there isn't testing every day. There isn't testing in February at all. And they have these designated test dates and then score release dates. So if you were wanting to take it in September, Emma, then you could have logged in already. Otherwise, you will schedule a later date. So yeah. So is one of your dates on here? Gracie, is your date on here? You see it? Okay, yes. So you should see the date that you'll be taking the exam, and you can take the exam all over the country, right? So let's say you're going to be home near your parents' house. You can always take it there, or you can take it obviously in Wellesley or Boston area. Boston has a lot of testing space usually, and as a big city. Yeah. So a quick note about the fee assistance program. So this is a program for to help folks pay for all the fees associated with the MCAT, but also medical school. So if you think that you may qualify for fee assistance based on your family income, then you can apply at the AMC website. And I actually linked down below there is a fee assistance webinar. So it's long. It's about an hour, but it goes through the whole program and qualifications and such. So if you or someone you know thinks that they may want to look into this program, definitely send them to the webinar. It's really helpful for folks that need it. You can see the picture on the right here gives you information on the different things that are part of the program, the benefits. And it is a significant discount, and it's really nice for folks that need that because it's expensive. Okay, so when to take the MCAT. So you may have decided this already, you may not have. So first, obviously, you need to decide when you're going to medical school. That's the big first thing. Once you've decided the year you're going to be applying to medical school, then you really can plan out your timeline for the MCAT. You want to obviously also make sure you've completed all your prerequisite coursework, and you may be finishing it right before the MCAT. You may be finishing it even as you're taking the MCAT, but you really want to be pretty much done before you take the test. For obvious reasons, it's helping you prep for the test. And then you want to give yourself some time. So at least 3 to 6 months to study. 4 to 6 months is really ideal because it gives you enough time to study in a way that doesn't make you feel that really high level of stress, like you need to be doing something, 12 hours a day. It allows you to have some time to do other things, whether it's school, extracurriculars, work, volunteering, breaks. You have to have a life too, usually when you're studying for the MCAT. So those are all the things you want to consider when you think about your date and giving yourself enough time to study. So generally speaking, you want to take the MCAT by April of your applying year. So what do I mean by that? So in Gracie's case, she's going to be applying this May, right? Or June to medical school. So she'll be finishing her application up in May. So if she takes the MCAT by April, then her scores will be available to her schools. At the same time, her application is going to go to her schools. And so that gives you the early, application, because it's a rolling application process, and making sure that everything gets to the schools in time. So that's why we say April is really what you need to shoot for. If you're only taking it in April of your applying year, the downside to that is you're probably only taking it once, right? Because all of that is going to go right onto your schools. Certainly you can pull out of the application cycle and then take it again if you apply the following year, but you kind of have to consider all of those things as you're going in. Again, ideally, we always say you want to take the MCAT once. It's not a fun test to take more than once, but if you think you're the kind of person that might do it more than once, then you need to plan accordingly with your timing. So this last bullet here just talks about how many times you can take it. You can take it 3 times in a single testing year, 4 times over 2 years, and then you have 7 overall lifetime attempts for the MCAT. And let's hope you don't have to do it that many times. Usually we don't see a lot of, sometimes folks will have a bad testing day, and so they will do a redo and do better the second time. But usually from test 2 to test 3, there's not a big difference in score. So, kind of thinking about like what makes the most sense if you want to put yourself through it a third time is really up to you, but it can be kind of a hard thing to do for a little reward. So this here is just a webinar. So every year, the AAMC provides these really great webinars on all the information you need for studying for the MCAT. So you can see the content they cover there. I'm not going to play it for you. I wanted to provide it as a resource for you. It's an hour long, but it gives a lot of really great information on studying, reviewing content, reviewing concepts, all of the good stuff that they have through their organization. You'll notice that Cindy and I will always reference you to the AAMC because they are the creators of the test. We'll talk about later. There's lots of different options for study materials out there. You probably have heard of some of those. Princeton Review, UWorld, there is Blueprint, there is Kaplan, there is lots of options. So ultimately that's your decision, but we tend to steer our applicants back to the AAMC as often as possible, again, because they are the creators of the test and they are really, really trying to offer more free and discounted resources to applicants. So you'll notice when you go to their website, they have lots of information on creating study plans, um, and all sorts of different things for you to use as someone that's going to take the MCAT, even if you're not part of the fee assistance program. So that is something that is very helpful. So when you're creating a study plan, some things to think about. So first and foremost, choose your test date. So once you have your test dates, then you can build a plan back from there. Choosing a test date also just like solidifies that you're in it, right? And you can't back out. And so it really helps kind of keep you in line as you're studying. So determine how many months you have to study. And then you want to list out anything else you're doing during the MCAT. So some folks are still in school, so academics is an important piece that will take a good chunk of time up. Any extracurriculars or work or other obligations that you have, you want to make sure you have those all listed out. And I'll show you a sample schedule so you can kind of get an idea of what I mean. But before you even start building a plan, these are some of the things that you need to jot down and think about. And you also want to list like how much time you have each day to allocate to studying, right? So you may be studying 4 days a week, right? And the other days you're doing other things. And then you can kind of decide, do I have 4 hours this day and 6 hours that day? Do I have 8 hours one day? And kind of jotting that down as well before you even start kind of building a plan so that you know what you're even able to do. Deciding on how much each week you could study for the MCAT and definitely including sleep and rest and breaks in there as well. Burnout is a real thing. Folks that do really intensive study plans for short amounts of time, we do see tend to get more burnt out if they're not giving themselves the break that they need or they're trying to cram. The MCAT is not an exam you can cram. It's not an exam you can stay up all night and study for. It takes a lot of time, and that's why building a plan is so important. So the AAMC has awesome resources on creating study plan outlines, and there's some content from them there which talks a little bit about those resources. They also mentioned the CAN videos. Those are free prep videos that a lot of folks seem to like, and so those are linked off the AAMC website as well. I will actually show you. We can pull this up while we are kind of in this spot. So um I know Gracie already has a login for the AAMC. So if you don't have one yet, Emma, or if anyone else doesn't have one, you can create one at any time. It's nice to have because again, you can sign up for like notifications. You'll need it eventually. It's, never too early to do that. So this right here is just some information on preparing for the MCAT. And so kind of just show you a couple things. So how to create a study plan, what's on the MCAT, updates. So each year, obviously, they provide different updates, free planning and study resources. So all of this is really helpful. They have a few PDFs like this, so you can actually download it. And it has really, really helpful information on study plans. So again, this is kind of like something you do in the preparatory stage, right? So before you actually have your plan, like thinking about reading through some of these resources and making sure you've covered all your bases and you know exactly how you want to structure things. So you can kind of look through, and this actually links you to other resources they have as well. They provide you with different study worksheets. Really helpful. So like these are all links that will take you to different resources, and you can actually check these kind of as you go. So really nice, really helpful. I'll drop this in the chat if you want to kind of play around with it now. And then I'll show you. So sorry. Okay. So they have the MCAT official prep hub here. Register for the MCAT, get your test scores. So this is like a great page to bookmark for yourself as you're prepping and taking the MCAT. The prep hub, you just log in and it takes you to kind of the main page. And on the side here, it goes through kind of a bunch of different things that they offer on this portal. We'll talk about some free things they have. They actually have a couple free practice exams you can take, but you can click on study plan guide, and it will kind of take you through all of this great information. So really you can use this like if as you're self-studying, and you can kind of go through each of these tasks, which I think is really helpful. This here is takes us back to that study plan. So just like really endless information. So I would say if you are in the process of creating a study plan, you haven't gone through some of this yet, you definitely look through and see what will be most helpful for you. Obviously, everyone's a little bit different. Everyone's going to study a little different, but I want you to know all the resources that are out there and available for you because there are a lot. And sometimes they can be hard to kind of navigate. So I think doing some of this prep work before can be really helpful. So these are all just worksheets you can use. If we look at the study and guide plan, they have these Excel spreadsheets that you can even add your own study schedule into. This is what's on the MCAT. You can go between that and writing in your study plan. I'm going to show you a sample one of these, but this is just an example of like some of the important like information and worksheets that they do offer to you. Have either of you checked these out yet?
I started looking at them today,
Oh, nice. Good.
but I think it's, yeah.
So it's all there. So it's a matter of figuring out like what works best for you as you go. But again, keep in mind the hub. It has a lot of really good stuff. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation here. Okay. So quick overview of different ways to study. So again, this is something that you want to consider before you start your study plan. Are you going to self-study? Are you going to take a prep course? Are you going to get a tutor? Right. So we have so many options. And I know applicants that have done all three. And really a lot or most of our applicants self-study at Wellesley. And that's for a number of reasons. You get all the prerequisite coursework. You're really well prepared, I think, to take the MCAT when the time comes around. So self-study is usually sufficient for our students. But I have seen students that are maybe struggling in a content area. So maybe they feel like they're really not strong in chemistry and, they kind of made it through the coursework, but don't feel like they fully understand the content. They may get a one-on-one tutor to help them really relearn some of that for the MCAT. That is obviously a little bit more costly. So a big consideration in how you're going to study obviously is cost. There's costs associated really with everything. So you have to make that decision, based on what resources are available to you. So other option is a prep course. So Wellesley College Career Education, we have a discount program through the Princeton Review, which they have lots of prep courses. And there's different versions of prep courses, right? So you can do them online or in person. They can be live, which means like in real time, like you and I, or more self-paced. So you have all the materials and you self-pace it. So there's different options there. Again, the downside is cost, right? So if you're paying for a prep course, these can be thousands of dollars. I think the upside is that you are able to have someone hold you accountable for some of this studying, right? So in a self-study program, you're really self-accountable, right? So you have to be dedicated to your end goal. You're the one using those study sheets to kind of determine 6 hours a day. This is the content. This is that. So if you skip it, you skip it. Nobody says, where were you, right? Whereas if you're in one of these prep courses, you typically have a teacher or tutor who's going to hold you accountable on content. So there's upsides and downsides to both. I have heard from applicants that have taken prep courses. I actually had an applicant say like, oh, I know myself and I will not stick to my own plan. So I need someone to be there. So that's a really good, I think, like example of reflecting on who you are as a student, as an academic, how you function, and what the best method is for you. And again, going back to that, most of our students self-study, right? So that means you create their own study plan and have enough grit to kind of stick to that plan for the months and months that you are studying. But keep those in mind. If you start out with a self-study plan and then you realizing, oh, wow, I'm really not holding myself accountable, then you may want to look into one of these other options. Okay, so a couple parts of your study plan, the first being a diagnostic test. So you probably have heard of this from peers by this point, but if you have any questions about it, please feel free to ask. A diagnostic is basically taking a full-length practice exam, again, of your choice, but the AAMC offers a full-length for free, one full-length for free. And this gives you just an introduction to where you are right now, right? So you're going to get a score. You're going to be able to see those 4 areas. You're going to be able to know kind of if you do have a weakness, right? Or an area where you need to improve, you'll be able to get all of that from a diagnostic. We suggest you take the diagnostic as one of the first things you do. And sometimes applicants are like, but I haven't reviewed any content. But that's okay. We don't think that you're going to knock the diagnostic out of the park and be done, right? This is really just to get you in the mindset of the MCAT. What's it like? The length, the structure, and again, where are the areas that you really need to focus on for studying? As we mentioned earlier, one of the hardest parts about this test is just the pure length. And building up the stamina to sit there for the 7.5 hours and perform, multiple choice questions. So again, taking a diagnostic to start off is going to help get you in the mindset for where you need to be to eventually, take this test on your test date down the line. So it is an important piece of the puzzle. If you've started your study plan and haven't taken a full-length test yet, I would recommend that you schedule yourself a date to do that as soon as you can. Some folks, when they take a diagnostic, will notice that one content area is really low. So that indicates that, okay, I really need to focus on that content area. A lot of folks will take a diagnostic and notice they're just kind of like overall low, right? Like, so, all those scores are lower than they'd want, but they're kind of consistent. And that probably indicates that you just need more time with these type of practice questions and practicing for the length of the test. So there's a lot you can get out of a diagnostic. And certainly if you take one and you have more questions about it, you could meet with Cindy or I, we can kind of talk you through that. And the last point here, I just always want folks to know to not stress too much about a diagnostic score. It's your first score. It's not your last score. And it's really just to get to know where you're at and what this test is going to feel like for you so you can figure out your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so then we have full-length MCAT practice exam. So a diagnostic is an example of that, but that shouldn't be the only time you take a full-length test. You should take a full-length test at least a handful of times throughout your study plan. So as you're making your study plan, you need to find 5 days at least that you have a full day to take a full-length test. That may seem a little bit overwhelming, but it really can be a really great help to folks, again, in building their stamina for testing day, and it's not something that you wanna leave out. You can get sample tests, again, from Kaplan, from Princeton Review, from, quite a different blueprints. There's a bunch of ones out there. AAMC, the makers of the MCAT, do offer 2 free now. One is unscored though, so that's more like, kind of just having you do a sample, and then they give a free scored test as well. After that, you could buy tests. You could buy them one by one if you want. I think they're like $35 a test. Or I'll talk about, we have like a bundle you can get through Career Ed as well. But there's different ways to kind of like buy the different resources you need. But it's definitely important to have quite a few different tests. I often hear applicants talking about like certain tests are harder from certain companies. Take this test, take that test. Again, we're gonna always like pull you back to the AAMC because they're the ones that make the test, and the structure is going to be closest to the actual test day. But certainly if you feel like you want to take tests from other places, that's fine. I would just suggest that you take a variety, right? So if you want to take, test 1 and 2 at AAMC, maybe you take one from Kaplan, you take one from Blueprint, and you take one. So that's fine as well. You can piece them together. That's really up to you at the end of the day. Just don't go too far down the Reddit hole there, because I think you're going to be just as prepared if you stick with all AAMC tests as well. People have a lot of thoughts on different companies that offer these tests, but at the end of the day, a lot of these companies are moneymakers, right? So they're kind of in it to make up a buck. So we really want to make sure we're doing what's right for us in the preparation for the MCAT. I'll pause. Anyone have any questions so far? I don't want to. Okay. All right, and then practice questions. So practice makes perfect. This is one of the things you want to spend a lot of time on, is practice questions. And again, a lot of different ways to do this. The same companies that offer the full-length tests will offer practice question. Often you can get them in bundles, where they'll give you a certain amount for a certain amount of money. The AAMC offers some free questions as well. I can't remember exactly how many. UWorld also offers a bundle for free before you have to pay. It's not a lot, but they will do that. It's a good way to test the questions to see if they're helping you learn, or if you'd rather use a different company for questions. But this should be a big part of your schedule, is just going over practice questions. A lot of applicants say they really like UWorld. So if you haven't checked out that resource yet, we actually, last year, we reached out to UWorld and asked for discounts for our students and alum, because so many people were already using it, that we were like, okay, this is really a go-to. Can we figure out how to get a discount? And they did give us one. So I'll share that with you if you don't already know. But that people tend to like that. And if you Google like a UWorld practice question, or actually I think you can just go to their website, you can see a sample. So I think folks like it because it's kind of like a flashcard style practice question, where they're giving you information while you're practicing if you get it wrong and so forth. So it may be a type of question structure that you really like. So that's one worth checking out as well. Anyone try any practice tests or questions that they've enjoyed or thought maybe they would pass on yet? Have we gotten to that point? Not yet. Okay. All right. Well, just pro tip, they do offer some for free, so you can test them and see if you like them or not before you buy like an actual package. Okay. So what should your study plan include? It needs to at least include these things, right? So we want to take a full-length diagnostic. We're going to be doing lots of content review, 5+ full-length practice tests. Some of that depends on how long you have, right? So if you have 3 months, that's a test quite often. So you have to think about what works within your testing schedule. And you'll see if you Google it, you get lots of different numbers. Some people will say you have to take 8, you have to take 7, you have to take 6. But I think as long as you allow yourself for 5 throughout the time, you should be fine, including that diagnostic. And then test question prep, right? So you want all of those things in a plan. We didn't talk in depth about content review, but certainly if you have any questions, let me know. We do have a library at Career Education where you can check out MCAT textbooks, so you can study that way. So content review can certainly be reading, right? It can be watching those videos, any studying videos, maybe podcasts, flashcards. So any way that you're currently like content reviewing for tests, or you have content reviewed for tests at Wellesley, similar for the MCAT. Okay, so here's the sample study plan. So this is if you're, again, you decided to self-study and you need to build this plan so that you can keep yourself on track, right? So this is part of the free resources at the AAMC. So you can pull up this document and you can type in all of your own information. So you can see that they have a couple categories: schedule, areas of study, resources, and strategies. So those are definitely 3 important things to kind of figure out before you start your study plan. You don't want to be working on where am I finding my study materials the day you're supposed to start studying, right? You want to have that done in advance. So you can see that they have the full week listed here. It looks like that this person's still in school, so they are taking class at some times of the day. They're also giving themselves days off, which I think is a nice way to do it if possible for you. And then they're dedicating chunks of time each day to study. What they don't have, which might just be because this is an off week, is they don't have a day where they have enough time for a full length test, as far as I can see, but they may be doing that like every other week or every 3rd week, so it may vary. But you can see like they're writing Monday, I have 6 hours available. They're writing down the areas they're studying and then their resources or strategies. So what they're going to be doing for studying. So if you were doing a 3-month study plan, you would do this for every week leading up to your MCAT test date. That makes sense? If you pay for one of the larger services, like a Princeton review course, they may create something like this for you. But again, if you're self-studying, this is something that you are going to be creating. If you need additional help creating this, certainly a one-on-one with Cindy and I, we can sit down and talk you through like what maybe makes the most sense. But it's pretty straightforward, right? I think the biggest pieces are first figuring out what you have available and what you're able to do each day. Another thing to note is if you need more than 1 day off, like let's say you're working full time and you're in school, you have all these things going on, you can change this around so that you're, studying for 8 hours for 3 or 4 days, and then you have the other days off. It's fine to adjust this. It has to be based on your own personal availability and personal schedule. So when you're putting together your resource list, so much to think about. Khan Academy has some great videos. Um, I'll show you a little bit later on. One of our alum gave some tips, and they basically said like when they got sick of reading, they would listen and watch the Khan Academy videos because it just kind of is a different way of studying and allows you from a break from the content reading. I thought that was a good tip. There are free resources out there. And so the AAMC, this is from that PDF I showed you before. They have a great outline on free and then low cost study materials for you to collect as you go forward. And I'll share with you Career Education's study materials as well. So just in the last couple of years, we've been able to do a couple things in terms of getting discounts for our students and alum. I wish it was more, but what we have right now is you can get the AAMC official prep bundle. So the bundle actually includes like all the practice test questions. It includes full length tests. It has a lot of stuff. You can look it up obviously to see exactly. And so you can get it for a little bit less than if you would buy it on your own. We also have the UWorld discount. So it's basically like 6 months of content for 3-month price, which is kind of nice. We do have discounts through Princeton Review as well if you decide to go that route. It's just like a little bit more expensive overall if you're buying a class, but we do have discounts with them as well. And then we have the prep books. So those are just free checkout. You just have to be obviously local so that you can get them and take it back to us. But those are some of the discounted resources that we have. So as you're putting together your study plan and you're thinking, what resources might I use? Keep in mind that some options are out there for you that give you a little discount. If you're part of the fee assistance program, you get a lot more for free in terms of study materials. So you get a lot of that bundle as part of the fee assistance program as well. All right, so some helpful tips. So as I had mentioned earlier, this is one of our alums who is now an MD PhD student at Harvard. And she has a blog, which is awesome. And you can actually just Google her blog and this will all come up. But I just took a screenshot. I thought these were some great tips from someone that's taken the MCAT and had the experience and did well and gotten to, you know, a school that she really wanted to. And so some of the tips I thought that were great. She mentioned about hindsight 2020. I like that one. So these flashcards that she mentions, they are used a lot in medical school, and I haven't had a lot of experience, but I've heard good things. Cindy knows students that have used them, and so definitely checking out those. Let's see, take as many practice tests as you can. So as I mentioned, full-length practice tests are such an important piece of this because the building of the stamina and getting into the conditions of the test. So she mentions Kaplan, Princeton Review, AAMC, etc. So being able to take them from many different places if you'd like to, she found was really helpful. And then I love the last tip, which is prioritizing self-care. Making sure you take days off. We do see burnout with MCAT studying, and you definitely don't want that to happen. So having a plan in place before you start will help with that. But that's a big part of it as well. Yeah. And her blog covers lots of different topics with medical school. This is just one of them. Another podcast that could be helpful. So again, if you're sick of reading and you want to listen to somebody talk about the MCAT other than me, there is this podcast is actually by Blueprint. So you kind of have to like ignore the fact that at times they are talking about Blueprint products. It's still applicable. But this is really interesting. They have a lot of really great information on like specific study plans so this one, for example, is a 4 to 6 month study plan. They always bring someone in that's either like a tutor for one of the major companies or a medical student themselves. And the host is an MD as well, or a previous MD. So it's just nice, I think, to get some ideas on how you might structure a plan, and also just hear from some other folks that have taken the test, like what they felt like went well, what went wrong. If you ever run into any questions when you're watching these, you can always shoot it by me and say, they said this, is that true? Right. But this one in particular, I've listened to quite a few, and I do think it's, relatively reliable compared to some of the YouTube videos that are out there about the MCAT, which are just very interesting, or Reddit or something like that. So this is another one that I find helpful, and there's quite a variety of options to listen to there as well. Okay, so pause for questions. It's like information overload. So these are some common questions about the MCAT we get. Some of these we've addressed already, but it's nice to kind of talk about them again. Can I take the MCAT more than once? Yes, you can. Ideally, you just take it once, but certainly you can. And we talked about how often you can take it in previous slides. How long does your score last? So that's another question we get, because sometimes folks want to take it, like, let's say you graduate from Wellesley, but you're not going to medical school right away, right? So you want some time off, but you want to take the MCAT because you feel like you have all the content fresh in your brain. Your score lasts up to 3 years. So you can keep that score for a little while. So that's nice to know. So even if you take it immediately after graduation and you wait 2 years to apply, you can still use that same test score. Next one, can you move your test date? Yes, we talked about this a little bit in the beginning. It's a fee to move your test date, so it's not ideal, but certainly you don't want to take the MCAT if you're not ready. So as you're studying, if you feel like, oh, wow, I chose a date that's way too soon and I'm not going to be ready, then it's worth paying the amount of money to move it to make sure you are ready by your test day. Can you take the MCAT more than once? You can. And how is the MCAT scored? So it's multiple choice, and they take all sections equally. Highest score you can get is a 528, lowest score 472. So it's a little bit confusing in terms of scoring, but after you've taken it and they give you the breakdown, you can kind of understand it a little bit better. I'll move forward real quick so you can see about 511. It's a little higher than 511 is the national average for folks that then get admitted to medical school. So that's, throughout the country. And then this actually is excuse me, some Wellesley data. So it has the DAT on there as well, but you can see that Wellesley MCAT score for accepted students is a little higher than national average, so more like a 514. And that's not to like freak you out or scare you in any way. It's just to give you like an idea of what the heck these numbers mean, because it is scoring like no other test, so it can be confusing. So you kind of know like, oh, all right, maybe, I should try to score around, some of these numbers. And so again, when you take your first practice test or your diagnostic, I would not expect like anywhere near these averages. So don't worry there. That's just your starting point. But as you kind of go along, you do want to try to see what your scores end up being and see if you can kind of work your way up if possible. Every medical school is different. Once you get into the process a little more, or if you want to meet with Cindy and I and look through the MSAR, it'll give you ranges for folks that were admitted and what their MCAT scores were. So oftentimes you'll see like, okay, so the average MCAT score for this school was a 510, but there's, this many people that were admitted at a 505 and this many people at a 5. So there really is a range at every school. The MSAR does have all that information. Which if you haven't seen that yet, I can show you. If you want full access, you have to purchase it, but it's not too expensive, I don't think. But yeah, so by no means does this mean that you have to score a 514 or a 511 to get into medical school. It's just to give you an idea of, the overview of where scores land. Any questions about that? Okay. And obviously, like more competitive schools are going to have higher MCAT scores for their applicants. It's certainly not the only factor, right? So it's a holistic application. They're looking at all sorts of different things, but the MCAT the score is important, right? And it does matter. Yes. So while I'm on frequently asked questions, I know Kylie asked me a question about the DAT, which we did like a brief overview in the beginning. So we might chat about that separately. But any other like things you've been thinking about or you've heard about that you have questions about the MCAT? Is anything coming to mind, Gracie?
I think that right now I'm in the process of like trying to figure out the study plan. So I feel like I don't know, I'm not super sure where to start, but I just opened the study plan from the blog that you showed. And I think that I might try to like copy her formatting and like use that.
Great. Yes. Yeah. So a starting is basically like deciding on your structure, again, like you need something to write this all down on, right? So whether it's like the AMC, like Excel spreadsheets or a TER spreadsheet or whatever you want to use, and then building a plan out based on your own schedule obviously is important. What do you like about the one she has?
I think it's like feels more realistic maybe just because I know that like a Wellesley student made it when they were at Wellesley.
Okay, good.
I think, yeah, I'm definitely gonna have, I think, to like look at my course schedule for the spring and kind of like place stuff differently. So I
Mhm,
think I may meet with you guys soon to see if
mhm.
how things are working out with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be hard to study for the MCAT when you're still a student, as you know. There's a lot going on, a lot to balance. So good. I'm glad you found that resource helpful. And I would start to build it, right? And just give yourself some time to make adjustments before you actually have to start it. But yeah, certainly like if you want to like come meet with Cindy and I and share your plan. Um, and again, making sure you have time in there for breaks if possible.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be working, volunteering, anything else?
I'm on the e-board of 2 orgs, and then I'm supposed to be volunteering at Newton Wellesley, but I'm only gonna take 3 classes.
All
And
right.
my schedule worked out that I have class 2 days a week, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that I can get good chunks of
Yep.
time
That sounds like
to
it.
study.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, you're going to be busy. And that's so even more important for you to like have a structured plan before you start. Because you want to make sure you can stick to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you don't feel like, ah, I'm just going to skip today because I'm burnout. Um, so as far as I have a question in the chat about checking out the review books from Career Ed. No, you can definitely do that. We actually only have a couple DAT books and we do have one available right now. So absolutely check one out. All you have to do is send me an email and then I'll schedule a time for you to come get it. There's a form you'll fill out so we know which book you have. Um, so yes, you can do that at any time. We typically do for the library like book checkout, we typically do 4 months, but we allow usually for renewals if you need to do that. And then if you need to keep it over the summer, we'll just make sure we communicate and you can let me know that you still have the book and you're going to bring it back. Just don't move. Don't graduate and go somewhere with the book because then I won't get it back. But as long as you're going to come back after summer, we have some flexibility with you using it during that time as well. Good questions. All right. So I know we're kind of up to the end of the time now. So if you don't have any other questions, let me first